Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode we're doing Walking in Memphis, where we review old CWA Wrestling from the Memphis territory. This episode we're reviewing a show from March 26th of 1988. The link will be down here on the comments for the YouTube video that I watched to review this, so you could go back and watch it yourself. Or if you'd like to pause this, watch this, and then come back to the review so you don't get spoilers, you can do that as well. If this is your first show here, we grade everything on a 1 to 5 scale. 1 being the best, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. I give that explanation a 1 because it was terrible. But anyway, let's jump right into it. The first match of the evening, we have Eddie Gilbert versus the most unfortunately named wrestler in the history of wrestling, Ken Raper. And from what I understand, that's the gentleman's real name. So, yeah, I feel bad for him. Ken was a journeyman undercard guy for Memphis back in the day. Eddie Gilbert, I'm happy that I got one of the episodes, because Eddie Gilbert's a guy I really liked, especially when I was around this age. Eddie Gilbert was one of my favorite wrestlers with what he was doing here and the UWF and even in WCW. I really enjoyed the work that Eddie Gilbert was doing, and I still do to this day. I think he's one of the underrated guys. This was a solid match, but it was the match more played out to the story that would go on through the entire show, which was basically the Gilbert clan running wild. In the match, we see Missy Hyatt trying to get Randy Hales to leave commentary so she could take his spot. Eddie Gilbert gets out of the ring, starts arguing, basically trying to bully Randy Hales. Gilbert ends up getting counted out. Ken Raper picks up the surprise win here. After the count out, we see Tommy Gilbert and Doug Gilbert come out, the rest of the Gilbert clan. It ends with them throwing a fireball in Randy Hales' face, which, believe it or not, the poor quality of the video made the fireball look better, because I don't know that in the HD, 4K, 8K era, throwing a fireball is going to look as good as it did here, because when the fireball flew on this video, the edges were fuzzy. The edges, it kind of looked bigger than it probably really was. And this was one of the things, Memphis was famous for fireballs. Eddie Gilbert threw them, Jerry Lawler threw them. Everybody in Memphis at some point or another either took a fireball or threw a fireball. This was a great opening segment. Like I said, it helped to weave the story all the way through the rest of the night. I'm giving this a 5 for the whole segment. And what I'm going to do with these, because there's so much, the interviews lead right into matches and so forth, I'm going to kind of review it by segment with the match, if that makes sense. Now, if there's a segment commercial break, that segment's going to be a standalone. But if it bleeds into each other, or they're on the same story, that's going to go as one. Next up, we have the aforementioned Tommy and Doug Gilbert going up against a team that they announced as Reynolds and Johnson, which I don't think they ever said their first names. If they did, I do apologize. This is a really good match. Tommy Gilbert is a guy I've heard of. I've heard more of than I've seen. This may be, and I probably forget that I've seen a lot of his matches, but this is probably one of the less than 5 matches I've seen of his. I've heard a lot of good things of his. Doug Gilbert, I've seen more as Nightmare Freddy than I've seen as Doug Gilbert. Not saying that I haven't seen his Doug Gilbert run. His Doug Gilbert run was good as well. But this Reynolds and Johnson obviously are the enhancement guys on this match. Tommy and Doug pick up the win here with a good. I thought it was it was a decent match. Afterwards, you get more of them harassing Lance Russell, which brings out Jeff Jarrett and Jeff Jarrett and Eddie Marlin. It slipped my mind for a second. Who at the time were feuding with the Gilbert clan. I give this whole thing a 3. I thought it was good. Not quite as good as the opening, but still pretty good. Next up, we get a quiet time with Brother Ernest Angel, which is kind of interesting because I've been not dealing with this, but I've been binge watching The Righteous Gemstones, which I don't know how I'm this far behind, and just found out about this show not recently. Interesting that after watching that, seeing this televangelist gimmick, which were big in the 80s. The 80s, there were a ton of televangelists on TV. I think it was Jimmy Swaggart, Jim and Tammy Faye Baker, and they all were more righteous than now, but they all had kind of an undercurrent of something evil went on there, which is kind of why you see this evil character in Brother Ernest Angel here. I thought it was a good, decent segment. We come from that. It was basically a pre-tape where Lance Russell's trying to call Jerry the King Lawler and he fumbles all about it. It kind of dragged on a little bit. It leads us into our next match, which is Rick Fontana and William Freezer Thompson versus Max Payne and Gary Young. Max Payne, the future Man Mountain Rock. This match between the segment and the fumbling calling Lawler, and I know this was live, so I gotta give it a little bit of a thing for that. But they could have done that better. They could have worked the telephone call better. I mean, you just have to play that you're calling him and have him in another room on a PA, to be honest with you. The match wasn't great. The segment kind of fumbled along. Max Payne and Gary Young pick up the win here. I'm going to give this a 2. Probably my least favorite segment on the show and my least favorite match on the show. But, again, the story's continuing because Jerry Lawler's involved in the Eddie Gilbert storyline. And at this point, Missy Hyatt, after the first match, she joined in on commentary, which I failed to mention. So they were kind of trying to play up Missy versus Lawler, which is awesome. I love both these personalities. Now, coming from that, our next segment, we got him calling Lawler again. This time they get through. Him and Missy Hyatt argue a bit. Then we see an interview with Ken Wayne and the Bruise Brothers, who, if you see my last show, I mentioned seeing one of the Harris boys in the ring and not knowing if it was or they just happened to be named the same. It definitely is the same guy, because this is the Bruise Brothers, Ron and Don Harris, who, if you see this picture here, it's the only one I could find without their, I mentioned this in the last video, without their offensive tattoos, which I'm not going to show on here. I don't care if it's part of their body. I am not going to show their tattoos. And if you know, you know. If you don't know, just look up the Harris Brothers and you'll see the tattoos they have on their arms. Anyway, this is pre-tattoo. They're blonde, which I didn't remember them ever being blonde. Kind of almost looked like a Billy Ray Cyrus tribute band. But anywho, so we get an interview with them. Brings out Billy Travis at the end. This was a decent interview. I liked it. I think Ken Wayne's a good talker. The Bruise Brothers were kind of early in their career here. Billy Travis is a great talker. Good interview. Leads us right into our next match, which is Brickhouse Brown and Big Bad Jim, who they mentioned was a former football player from the Indianapolis Colts. I didn't remember this guy at all. I couldn't find anything when I tried looking up information on him, so he must have been a guy that went in and out really quickly. Again, I've watched wrestling for 40 years. I'm not going to remember every guy that I've seen, especially ones that have only been on a show for maybe a month or even 6 months. But anyway, Brickhouse Brown and Big Bad Jim were going up against Rodney Napper and Doug Dancing. Obviously, Brickhouse and Big Bad Jim were the names in this. This is kind of interesting because I believe at the time this was pre the Blackbirds, Brickhouse Brown. This was when Brickhouse Brown was still more of a managerial role. And I know that he did most of the work here. Big Bad Jim was only in for a little bit. The team of Brickhouse and Big Bad Jim pick up the win here. I thought this was a good match. I like parts of the segment leading into it. I'm giving it a 3. That brings us into our final match of the evening, a 6-man tag match. We get the aforementioned Billy Travis, Kenny Wayne, and very young Jeff Jarrett going up against a team of Larry Wright, Keith Eric, and the Blue Knight. Again, obviously Travis, Wayne, and Jarrett are the known commodities here. That was a good match, good way to showcase these 3 guys. I really enjoy seeing Jeff Jarrett back then. I want to say, I might be wrong on this, but I want to say he was the PWI Rookie of the Year this year. And you can definitely see where Jeff Jarrett was going from where he was here. Ken Wayne, a good wrestler. Billy Travis as well. Of course, these 3 pick up the win here. Another solid match, not a great match though. I'm giving this a 3. All in all, the overarching storyline of Missy Hyatt, the Gilberts, them going, and Missy Hyatt is part of the Gilbert clan, at least for the storyline. Them and Lance Russell arguing the whole time. The back and forth between the matches. The overall arcing story was kind of good. And that's kind of what I think is missing in our wrestling today. We get a little bit of it on when we watch SmackDown and we see the Bloodline story. But back like this, your main story would carry through a show. Even during the Attitude Era, Austin versus The Rock, if that was a story, that would be the highlight on several segments. Nowadays, you get a little bit of it. You get segment. You might get an interview or a promo in the beginning of the show that leads to a match later in the show. But nothing where the overarching story or main story is carried through the whole thing, which is what I really enjoyed about this. And something I always enjoy when I go back and I watch these Memphis shows, how well their stories are written out and how they play them out and how they find little ways to advance the storyline. Is the Fireball innovative? Like I said, they did it a million times. It's not, but they found a way to make it interesting because Randy Hales took the Fireball. Is a heel manager or valet trying to get on commentary innovative? It's not, but because it's Missy Hyatt and how interesting she is, she made this more interesting. With all that being said, this is my third time going back and picking a random Memphis show to watch and watching it. This is my least favorite of the 3, but it doesn't mean it's bad. I would still recommend going back and watching this because it's a very enjoyable show. Overall, I'm going to give the show, I'm leaning towards a 3. If I did halves, I'd probably say 3.5. There's some really great things on here. Character development's great. The squash matches gets a little boring trying to watch this with 2022 eyes. However, you do get to see some great talent and how good they were. So again, kind of a mixed bag. I'm going to give it a 3. I definitely recommend checking out, which again is that it's down here in the comments. There are not in the comments, in the description. There's going to be a link to where you could go and watch this. with all that being said, I'm going to give the show overall a 3. If you made it this far, please hit the like button, subscribe, share, all that fun stuff. If you made it to the end, I know you enjoy this video. Give me a double J down in the comments to let me know you made it all the way to the end of the video. With all that, my name is George Coles, and this has been another episode of Walking in Memphis.